Harlem, 1968. The ambulance screams down 7th Avenue, but it's already too late. Inside, a man lies dying, his heart giving out after 6 decades of violence, betrayal, and blood. The paramedics don't know his name. They don't know that half of Harlem will weep when they hear the news. They don't know they're watching a king die. Ellsworth Raymond Johnson, Bumpy to those who knew him, feared him, loved him, takes his last breath on a stretcher. No fanfare, no final words, just silence. But the streets remember. The streets always remember. Within hours, word spreads like wildfire. From the tenements to the corner stores, from the jazz clubs to the policy banks. The most dangerous man Harlem has ever known is dead. And the question everyone asks is the same. How did a boy from Charleston become a legend written in blood? To understand that, you have to go back. Back to a time when Harlem was a battlefield and Bumpy Johnson was the executioner. Charleston, South Carolina, turn of the century. This is where it begins. Not in the glamour of New York, but in the brutal heat of the Jim Crow South, where black lives are worth less than nothing, where the wrong look, the wrong word, the wrong breath can get you killed. October 31st, 1905. A child is born with a deformity, a grotesque bump protruding from the back of his skull. His mother weeps. His father looks away. The other children will torment him for it. They call him Bumpy, and the name becomes a curse he'll carry his entire life. But something else grows alongside that bump, something dark, something dangerous. Rage. Young Bumpy watches his father work himself to death for pennies. He watches white men beat black men in the streets with impunity. He watches his mother scrub floors until her hands bleed, and still the white families she works for treat her like dirt. And he learns the fundamental truth of his existence. In America, if you're black and poor, you're prey. By the time he's 12, Bumpy is different from the other kids. Harder, meaner. He doesn't run from fights, he starts them. When the white boys come looking for trouble, Bumpy meets them with fists and rocks and fury. He wins some, loses others, but he never backs down. His father beats him for it. "You trying to get yourself killed, boy?" Bumpy just stares back, silent, because dying on his feet seems better than living on his knees. 15 years old, spring of 1920. Bumpy is walking home from work. He's been loading crates at the dock since dawn, when he sees it happen. A white man accosts a black woman on the street, grabs her, says things that make Bumpy's blood boil. The woman tries to pull away. The man slaps her. And something inside Bumpy snaps. He doesn't think, doesn't calculate, he just moves. The white man doesn't see him coming. Bumpy hits him once, a haymaker that drops him like a stone. The man's friends start shouting. Someone runs for the police. Bumpy knows what comes next. In the South, a black boy who strikes a white man doesn't get a trial. He gets a rope. His mother gives him the last of her savings, $7 and change, and puts him on a train heading north. She's crying, but her voice is steady. "Don't come back, Ellsworth. There's nothing here but death." She's right. Bumpy Johnson leaves Charleston and never looks back. New York City, 1920. When Bumpy steps off the train at Grand Central Station, he's carrying everything he owns in a cloth sack. $7 in his pocket. No friends, no family, no plan. Just survival. Harlem in the 20s is electric. The Renaissance is blooming. Jazz fills the air, poets read in salons. The Cotton Club draws white crowds uptown to see black performers they'd never speak to downtown. It's a golden age. But golden ages are built on foundations of misery. The reality is that most black folks in Harlem are packed into crumbling tenements, paying double the rent white folks pay for half the space. Jobs are scarce. Police are brutal. And underneath the music and the art and the culture, there's a darker economy. Numbers, gambling, bootleg liquor, protection rackets. This is where Bumpy finds his education. He tries honest work first, washing dishes, sweeping floors, loading trucks, but the money is a joke and the white bosses treat him like an animal. So Bumpy does what desperate men do. He turns to crime. At first, it's petty stuff, running numbers for the local policy banks, acting as muscle for debt collectors, standing guard at illegal dice games. But Bumpy is smart, observant. He watches how the rackets work, who pays who answers to who, where the real money flows. And he sees something the other street thugs don't see: organization. The most successful gangsters aren't the toughest. They're the smartest, the ones who build systems, the ones who inspire fear and respect in equal measure. Bumpy decides he's going to be one of them. But first, he needs to prove himself. Winter 1932. Bumpy is 26 years old and he's made a name for himself as an enforcer. When someone needs a message delivered, the kind of message that leaves bruises, they call Bumpy Johnson. He's good at it, efficient, professional. He doesn't take pleasure in the violence, but he doesn't shy away from it either. It's just business. But there's one person who sees more in him than just a thug with quick fists: Stephanie St. Clair. Madame Queen, the most powerful woman in Harlem. Stephanie is a legend, a French Caribbean immigrant who built a numbers empire from nothing. She's elegant, educated, and absolutely ruthless. She wears fur coats and diamond rings, and she carries a .38 revolver in her purse. The Italian mobsters hate her because she refuses to bow. The cops fear her because she has dirt on everyone, and the people of Harlem worship her because she's one of them. She summons Bumpy to her apartment one evening. It's a test, though he doesn't know it yet. The apartment is lavish: velvet curtains, expensive furniture, the smell of French perfume. Stephanie sits behind a mahogany desk, smoking a cigarette in a long holder. She looks at Bumpy like a jeweler examining a rough diamond. "You work for Mickey Doyle, don't you?" she says. Bumpy nods. Doyle is a mid-level operator, small time. "He's an idiot," Stephanie says flatly. "He cheats his runners, disrespects his customers, and he's going to get himself killed within a year." Bumpy says nothing. It's not his place to agree or disagree. Stephanie leans forward. "I'm offering you a choice, Mr. Johnson. You can keep working for idiots and die poor, or you can work for me and learn how to build something that lasts." Bumpy doesn't hesitate. "What do you need me to do?" Stephanie smiles. "Whatever I tell you." And just like that, Bumpy Johnson enters the inner circle. Over the next 2 years, Stephanie teaches Bumpy everything: how to run a policy bank, how to manage a crew, how to read a ledger, how to spot a liar, how to negotiate, how to intimidate without throwing a single punch. But most importantly, she teaches him the fundamental rule of power: never let them see you as less than you are, Bumpy. You bow to no one, not the Italians, not the Irish, not the police, no one. Bumpy absorbs every lesson. He's not just muscle anymore. He's becoming something else, something dangerous. And then in 1933, everything changes. Dutch Schultz decides he wants Harlem. Schultz is a psychopath, a violent, paranoid mob boss from the Bronx who's built an empire on bootlegging and extortion. He's killed more men than most people have met, and now, with Prohibition ending, he needs a new racket. Harlem's numbers game is perfect. Millions of dollars a week flowing through the streets, and Schultz wants every penny. He sends his men in like an invading army. They beat runners. They torch policy banks. They execute anyone who refuses to pay tribute. And they make one thing crystal clear: Harlem belongs to Dutch Schultz now. Stephanie fights back. She rallies the other Harlem operators. She goes to the police, though they're useless. She writes letters to newspapers exposing the mob's crimes. But Schultz doesn't care about newspapers. He cares about money, and he's willing to kill as many people as it takes to get it. The violence escalates, bodies start dropping, fear spreads through Harlem like a virus. And Bumpy Johnson watches it all with cold, calculating eyes. One night Stephanie calls him to her apartment. She's furious. One of her policy banks was just firebombed. 3 people dead. "We can't keep fighting them head-on," she says. "Schultz has too many men." Bumpy is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "Then we don't fight his men, we fight him." Stephanie looks at him sharply. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Bumpy replies, "that if Dutch Schultz wants a war, we give him one. But we fight it our way, in the shadows, in the streets, where we have the advantage. It's a dangerous plan, suicidal. Even." But Stephanie sees the fire in Bumpy's eyes, the hunger, the rage. "Do it," she says. 3 days later, one of Dutch Schultz's top enforcers walks into a speakeasy on 145th Street. He's been terrorizing the neighborhood for weeks, beating shopkeepers, threatening families, acting like he owns the place. He orders a drink, lights a cigar, laughs with his crew. And then Bumpy Johnson walks in. The enforcer recognizes him. Everyone knows Bumpy works for Madame Queen. The enforcer grins, a cruel, mocking grin. "You lost, boy," he sneers. Bumpy doesn't answer. He just walks up to the bar, slow and deliberate. The room goes quiet. Everyone can feel it, the tension, the violence hanging in the air like smoke. Bumpy leans in close to the enforcer and says, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Tell Dutch Schultz that Harlem doesn't belong to him. It never will." The enforcer laughs, reaches for his gun. He's too slow. The gunshot is deafening in the enclosed space. The enforcer drops, blood pooling beneath him. Bumpy doesn't run. He walks out calmly, gun still in hand, and disappears into the Harlem night. And just like that, the war begins. Blood in the streets. That's what they'll remember, not the jazz or the poetry or the Renaissance. Blood. 1 Feb, the body is discovered within the hour. Dutch Schultz's enforcer, a man who terrorized Harlem for months, dead in a pool of his own blood on a speakeasy floor. 2 bullets, center mass, professional. By morning, every gangster in New York knows what happened. And more importantly, they know who did it. Bumpy Johnson just declared war on the most violent man in the city. The Bronx, Dutch Schultz's headquarters. Schultz is a different breed of monster. Where other mobsters are calculated and cold, Schultz is unhinged. He's killed men for looking at him wrong. He's tortured informants with fire and pliers. He once shot a man in the face during a dinner meeting because he didn't like the way he chewed. When he hears about his dead enforcer, he doesn't rage. He smiles. Because now he has an excuse to do what he's wanted to do all along: burn Harlem to the ground. He calls in his top lieutenants, hard men, killers, the kind of people who don't flinch at murder. "I want every policy bank in Harlem shut down," Schultz says, his voice eerily calm. "I want every runner beaten. I want every storefront that doesn't pay us protection destroyed. And I want this Bumpy Johnson. I want him brought to me alive." His men nod. They know what alive means. It means Schultz wants to make an example, wants to make Bumpy suffer. Within 48 hours, Schultz's army descends on Harlem. It's not a war, it's a massacre. Schultz's men hit policy banks with baseball bats and crowbars, smashing everything in sight. They torch storefronts. They beat runners in the streets in broad daylight while people watch in horror. One shop owner, an old man who's lived in Harlem for 30 years, refuses to pay protection money. Schultz's men drag him into the street and break both his legs with tire irons. The message is clear: submit or die. Fear spreads through Harlem like a plague. Families lock their doors. Businesses close early. The streets that were once alive with music and laughter are now filled with sirens and screams. And Dutch Schultz's men swagger through it all like conquering soldiers. But Bumpy Johnson doesn't run, doesn't hide. He fights back. While Schultz's army operates in the open, loud, violent, overwhelming, Bumpy does something smarter. He goes underground. He pulls together a crew of the most dangerous men in Harlem, not the biggest, not the flashiest, the meanest, men who grew up fighting for scraps, men who have nothing to lose. Junie Byard, a stone-cold killer who once beat 3 men to death with his bare hands. Nat Pettigrew, a former boxer who can snap a man's neck like a twig. Cadillac Red, a numbers runner turned enforcer with a taste for revenge. These men don't have Schultz's numbers, they don't have his guns, but they have something else: knowledge. They know Harlem, every alley, every rooftop, every escape route. It's their territory, their home. And Bumpy turns it into a killing field. The first retaliation comes 3 days after Schultz's initial assault. 2 of Schultz's collectors are making their rounds in the neighborhood, shaking down local businesses. They're cocky, overconfident. They think they're untouchable. They walk into an alley to count their money. They never walk out. Bumpy's men are waiting, silent, efficient, no witnesses, no noise. Just blood. The bodies are found the next morning, dumped in an alley off Lenox Avenue. Throats cut, money gone. Schultz is furious. He sends more men, bigger crews, more guns. And Bumpy kills them too. 1 by 1, 2 by 2, in alleys, in basements, in the back rooms of speakeasies. Schultz's men start to realize something terrifying. In Harlem, they're not the hunters. They're the prey. But the violence doesn't just touch the gangsters. It bleeds into the community. A young mother is caught in a shootout between Bumpy's crew and Schultz's men. She dies instantly, her groceries scattered across the pavement. A policy runner, just 18 years old, is tortured by Schultz's enforcers for information about Bumpy's whereabouts. They leave him broken and bleeding in a vacant lot. A barbershop that refuses to pay Schultz protection money is firebombed in the middle of the night. The owner barely escapes with his life. Harlem is drowning in violence. And Bumpy sees it all. He attends the young mother's funeral, stands in the back of the church, silent, watching her husband collapse in grief. He visits the tortured runner in the hospital, sees the fear in the boy's eyes. He feels something he hasn't felt in years: guilt. But guilt is a luxury, and in a war, luxury gets you killed. After the funeral, Bumpy gathers his crew in the basement of a funeral parlor. The irony isn't lost on him. Schultz thinks he can terrorize us into submission, Bumpy says, his voice cold and steady. He thinks we'll break, but he's wrong. We don't break, we break him. Junie Byard speaks up. We're killing his men, Bumpy, but he keeps sending more. How long can we keep this up? Bumpy's eyes are like ice. As long as it takes, we hit them harder, smarter. We make them afraid to walk our streets. Nat Pettigrew nods. What do you need us to do? Bumpy's answer is simple: hunt. The war escalates. Bumpy's crew starts targeting Schultz's operations directly. They hit his collection routes. They rob his gambling dens. They ambush his enforcers. And they do it with a level of brutality that shocks even the hardened criminals of New York. One of Schultz's top lieutenants, a man responsible for multiple murders in Harlem, is found tied to a chair in an abandoned warehouse. He's been beaten so badly he's unrecognizable. His fingers are broken. His teeth are missing. He's alive, barely, and when the police find him, all he can say is one word: Bumpy. Dutch Schultz is losing control. His men are terrified. Some refuse to go into Harlem. Others desert entirely, unwilling to risk their lives for a numbers racket. And the Italian mob, Lucky Luciano, Mayor Lansky, Frank Costello, are watching from a distance, wondering if Schultz is more trouble than he's worth. But Bumpy knows something important. He can't win a war of attrition. Schultz has more resources, more men, more money. Eventually, the sheer weight of numbers will crush him. So Bumpy does something unexpected. He doesn't just fight Schultz's men. He fights for the people. He walks the streets of Harlem, not in shadows but in daylight. He talks to shop owners, to mothers, to the old folks who remember when the neighborhood was safe. And he makes them a promise. Schultz treats you like cattle. He bleeds you dry and gives you nothing. But I'm one of you, and I'll protect what's ours. It's a gamble, a huge one. But slowly it works. When Schultz's collectors come around, they find doors locked, windows shuttered, silence. When they try to shake down a shop owner, they find themselves surrounded by hostile crowds, people who refuse to cooperate, refuse to talk, refuse to submit. And when Schultz's men are caught alone, Bumpy's crew is waiting. The people of Harlem are choosing sides, and they're choosing Bumpy. But with every victory comes a cost. One night, a 17-year-old girl named Ruth is killed when a stray bullet crashes through her apartment window. She was studying for school, dreaming of becoming a teacher. Now she's dead. Bumpy attends her funeral. He stands in the back, hat in hand, and watches her mother, a woman he's known for years, weep over the casket. After the service, the mother approaches him. Her eyes are red, but her voice is steady. "This is your fault," she says quietly. "All of this, the violence, the death, you brought this to our streets." Bumpy wants to argue, wants to explain, but he can't. Because she's right. He nods once slowly. "I'm sorry." She slaps him hard. The sound echoes through the empty church. "Sorry doesn't bring my baby back," she says, and then she walks away. Bumpy stands there for a long time, alone in that church, staring at nothing. And for the first time since the war began, he wonders if it's worth it. But the war doesn't stop for doubt. It doesn't stop for grief. It only stops when someone dies. October 1935, Palace Chop House, Newark, New Jersey. Dutch Schultz is sitting at a table counting money when two men walk in. They don't say a word. They just pull out guns and fire. Schultz is hit multiple times. He collapses, bleeding, dying. But the shooters aren't Bumpy's men. They're sent by the Commission, Lucky Luciano's organization. Because Schultz made a fatal mistake. He wanted to assassinate a federal prosecutor, and the Commission knew that would bring too much heat. So they voted, and Dutch Schultz was sentenced to death. He dies the next day, delirious and rambling about buried treasure and betrayal. And just like that, the war is over. When Bumpy hears the news, he feels nothing. No relief, no victory, just emptiness. Dozens are dead. Harlem is traumatized, and the throne Schultz left behind is now up for grabs. But before Bumpy can even think about claiming it, he gets a summons. Lucky Luciano wants to meet. The social club in Lower Manhattan is dimly lit, filled with cigar smoke and the quiet murmur of powerful men making deals. Bumpy walks in alone, no backup, no weapons. Just confidence. Lucky Luciano sits at the head of a long table, flanked by Mayor Lansky and Frank Costello. They're the three most powerful mobsters in New York. And they're looking at Bumpy like they're deciding whether to make him rich or kill him. Luciano gets straight to the point. "You caused us a lot of problems, Bumpy." Bumpy doesn't flinch. "Schultz caused the problems, I just ended them." Luciano smiles, a thin, dangerous smile. "True, which is why you're still breathing." He leans forward. "Here's the deal. You run Harlem for us, you keep the numbers flowing, you keep the peace. And in return, we protect you. We make you the boss under us." It's not a partnership, it's a leash. But it's also an opportunity. Bumpy looks Luciano in the eye and says one word: deal. As Bumpy walks out into the cold New York night, he knows exactly what he's done. He's made a deal with devils. But he's also just become the most powerful black man in Harlem. And as he lights a cigarette and watches the city lights flicker in the distance, one thought burns in his mind. The streets ran red with blood to get here. And they'll run red again to keep it. 14/09/1936. Bumpy Johnson is 30 years old, and Harlem belongs to him. Not officially, not on paper, but where it matters, on the streets, in the alleys, in the backrooms where real power lives, everyone knows the truth. Bumpy Johnson owns Harlem. He controls the numbers rackets that funnel millions through the neighborhood every year. He oversees the policy banks, the gambling dens, the underground lotteries that give poor families a sliver of hope. Every hustler, every pimp, every small-time crook operating north of 110th Street answers to him. Or they bleed. But Bumpy doesn't rule like Dutch Schultz did, with terror and chaos. He rules with discipline. He walks the streets in expensive suits, but not flashy ones. He eats at the same soul food joints as the working folks. He knows the names of the grandmothers on the stoops, the kids playing stickball, the shop owners trying to survive. When a landlord tries to evict a family unfairly, Bumpy pays a visit. The eviction disappears. When corrupt cops shake down a merchant, Bumpy has a quiet word with the precinct captain. The shakedowns stop. When one of his runners gets arrested, Bumpy's lawyers are there within the hour. He builds a reputation not just on fear, but on loyalty. To the people of Harlem, he's not just a gangster, he's their protector, their king. But kings always have enemies, and Bumpy's enemies are watching, waiting. The alliance with the Italian Mafia works for a while. Lucky Luciano and the Commission get their cut from Harlem's rackets. Bumpy runs the operations. Money flows, everyone profits. But there's an unspoken truth beneath the surface. The Italians don't see Bumpy as an equal. To them, he's a tool, useful for managing a neighborhood they don't understand, allowed to operate because it's convenient, because it's profitable. But the moment he forgets his place, the moment he tries to take more than they're willing to give, they'll erase him. And Bumpy knows it. Late at night, alone in his apartment, he thinks about it. He's built an empire, yes, but it's an empire on borrowed ground. He's the king of Harlem, but only because the Italians allow it. And Bumpy Johnson doesn't like asking permission. The resentment builds slowly, quietly. Small slights at meetings, disrespectful comments, deals changed without consultation. The Italians treat him like a subordinate, and every instance of it burns. But Bumpy is patient, strategic. He's learned to play the long game. He knows that if he moves too soon, if he challenges the Commission before he's ready, they'll crush him without hesitation. So he waits, he plans, and he builds his power in the shadows. But not everyone is willing to wait. Late 1930s, a new threat emerges: Vito Genovese. Genovese is ambitious, ruthless, and hungry. He's been watching Harlem's profits with greedy eyes, and he wants a bigger piece. He doesn't care about Luciano's arrangement with Bumpy. He doesn't care about keeping the peace. He just wants the money. Genovese starts making moves. His men show up at policy banks demanding higher tributes. They threaten runners. They beat collectors who resist. The message is clear. The old deal is over. Harlem belongs to the Genovese family now. Bumpy's response is immediate. When Genovese's crew tries to take over a policy bank on 135th Street, they find the doors locked and the street ominously quiet. When they force their way in, Bumpy's men are waiting. The fight is brutal, quick, bloody. 3 of Genovese's men end up in the hospital. 1 doesn't make it. The message Bumpy sends back is simple: touch my operations and you die. But Genovese doesn't back down. He sends more men, bigger crews, heavier guns. And suddenly, Harlem is a war zone again. The violence is vicious, relentless. A Genovese enforcer is found in the Harlem River, throat slit, weighted down with chains. 2 of Bumpy's numbers runners are gunned down outside a jazz club. 1 bleeds out on the sidewalk, while a crowd watches in horror. A policy bank is firebombed in the middle of the night. 5 people die in the flames, including a woman and her child who lived in the apartment above. The people of Harlem are trapped in the crossfire. Families keep their children inside. Shop owners close early. The streets that once pulsed with life are now filled with fear. And Bumpy feels every death like a knife to the gut. He attends the funerals, every single one. He stands in the back of churches, silent, watching families destroyed by his war. He doesn't sleep well anymore. He sees the faces of the dead, hears the mothers crying. But he can't afford to show weakness. Not now, not ever. One night he calls a meeting in the basement of a funeral parlor. His top men gather: Junie Bayard, Nat Pettigrew, Cadillac Red, and a dozen others. Hard men, killers. Bumpy looks them in the eye, his voice cold as winter. Genovese thinks he can take what we built. He thinks we'll break. He's wrong. We fight until he backs off or until one of us is dead. No surrender, no retreat. We hold the line. His men nod. They've bled for him before. They'll bleed again. And the war continues. But Bumpy knows the truth. He can't win a war of attrition. Genovese has the resources of the entire Italian Mafia behind him. He can replace every man Bumpy kills. He can outlast him, outspend him, and eventually crush him. So Bumpy does something smarter. He stops trying to beat Genovese. Instead, he outmaneuvers him. He reaches out to someone he hasn't spoken to in years: Frank Costello. Costello is one of the most powerful men in organized crime, a diplomat, a political fixer, a man who prefers bribes to bullets. He's also a rival of Vito Genovese. Bumpy arranges a secret meeting. They sit in a quiet restaurant in Midtown Manhattan, far from the chaos of Harlem. Costello, impeccably dressed, smoking a Cuban cigar, listens as Bumpy makes his case. Genovese is out of control, Bumpy says. He's drawing heat. Cops are investigating. Federal agents are asking questions. And when that heat comes down, it won't just burn me. It'll burn all of you. Costello takes a slow drag from his cigar. So what do you want? Bumpy leans forward. I want you to rein him in. Tell him to back off Harlem. And in return, I'll make sure the money keeps flowing. Quiet, clean, no more wars, no more heat. It's a gamble, a dangerous one. Costello studies him. This isn't just a gangster begging for help. This is a businessman making a deal. After a long silence, Costello smiles. You've got balls, Bumpy, I'll give you that. He extends his hand. Deal. Within weeks, Vito Genovese's men pull back from Harlem. No announcement, no fanfare, but the attacks stop. The muscle disappears. The tributes are no longer demanded. Bumpy has won. But the victory tastes like ash. Dozens are dead, families destroyed, businesses burned, and Bumpy knows he's now indebted to Frank Costello, a debt that will eventually come due. Still, Harlem is his again. And this time, he's not taking chances. He reorganizes everything, recruits new enforcers, builds alliances with black gangsters in Brooklyn, the Bronx, New Jersey. He diversifies extortion, loan sharking, and reluctantly narcotics. He becomes untouchable. Or so he thinks. The 40s pass in a blur of money and power. Bumpy consolidates his empire. He's not just the king of Harlem anymore, he's a legend. Stories about him spread through the underworld like gospel. They say he once walked into a room full of Italian mobsters and walked out with their respect. They say he's killed more men than anyone can count. They say even the cops are afraid of him. Some of it's true, some of it's myth, but Bumpy knows the power of reputation. Fear is a currency, and he's rich. But the law is patient. The law is relentless. The federal government has been building a case for years. Racketeering, extortion, narcotics trafficking. They've been watching, gathering evidence, waiting for the perfect moment. December 1951. U.S. Marshals raid Bumpy's apartment before dawn. He doesn't resist. He knows the game. He's been arrested before. But this time is different. This time they have everything. Witnesses, ledgers, recorded conversations, bank records. The trial is swift. The verdict is inevitable. Bumpy Johnson is sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. As the judge reads the sentence, Bumpy's face shows nothing. No fear, no anger, just cold calculation. Because even as they take him away in handcuffs, even as the prison door slams shut, Bumpy knows one thing. This isn't the end. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, 1954. The most dangerous prison in America, built to break the unbreakable. Bumpy Johnson sits in his cell, surrounded by the worst criminals the country has ever produced. Murderers, mobsters, men who would kill for a cigarette. But Bumpy isn't afraid. He's planning. He reads, studies law, philosophy, history. He watches the power dynamics inside the prison, learning who runs what, who owes who. And he waits. One morning, a guard tells him he has a visitor. Bumpy knows who it is before he sees him. Malcolm Little, transformed now, eyes burning with purpose. Soon to be known as Malcolm X. They sit across from each other, two men, two warriors. And in that visitor's room, something changes. Malcolm speaks of revolution, of building power that can't be taken, of unity and organization and purpose. And for the first time in his life, Bumpy Johnson wonders if there's more to power than violence. If there's more to life than blood in the streets. 1410 Alcatraz is designed to destroy men. The cold, the isolation, the endless gray of concrete and steel. Prisoners lose their minds here. They hang themselves. They attack guards just to feel something. They break. But Bumpy Johnson doesn't break. He evolves. Within months, he establishes himself inside the prison walls. Not through violence, though every inmate knows he's capable, but through intelligence. He's older now. Wiser. The young man who fought Dutch Schultz with bullets has learned that sometimes the mind is a sharper weapon than any gun. He reads constantly. Law books, philosophy. Malcolm X's letters arrive regularly now, filled with ideas about black empowerment, self-determination, the Nation of Islam. Bumpy doesn't join the nation. That's not his path. But the ideas resonate. For the first time in his life, Bumpy starts questioning the empire he built. All that blood, all that money, all that power. What did it actually accomplish? He controlled Harlem, yes, but did he help Harlem? Or did he just make himself rich off the desperation of his own people? The questions haunt him, night after night, year after year. 1952, 1953, 1954. Letters from home tell him his empire is crumbling. The Italians are taking over his policy banks. Young gangsters are carving up his territory, fighting among themselves like dogs over scraps. Everything he built is turning to ash. And there's nothing he can do about it, not from inside these walls. Malcolm visits whenever he can. They talk about everything: politics, religion, philosophy, power. Two men from different worlds finding common ground in the struggle. You built an empire, Bumpy, Malcolm says during one visit. But you built it in their system. You worked with their mobsters. You paid their cops. You played by their rules. Bumpy's jaw tightens. And it worked. I had power, real power. Did you? Malcolm leans forward, eyes intense. Or did they just let you think you had power? The moment you became inconvenient, look where you ended up. The words sting because they're true. Bumpy has always known he was on a leash, that the Italians allowed him to operate because it suited them, that the moment he stepped out of line, they could, and did, destroy him. Malcolm softened slightly. I'm not judging you, brother. I lived that life too, but there's another way, a way to build power they can't take from you. And what's that? Bumpy asks. Unity, organization, purpose. We stop tearing each other down and start building something that lasts. Bumpy is quiet for a long time. Then he says, "That's a beautiful dream, Malcolm, but dreams don't pay the rent. Dreams don't put food on the table. In Harlem, only power survives." Malcolm smiles, sad knowing. Then maybe it's time we changed what power looks like. That conversation stays with Bumpy long after Malcolm leaves. He starts reading more. Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, Frederick Douglass. He devours everything he can about black resistance, black history, black identity. And slowly, something shifts inside him. He's still a gangster, still ruthless, still willing to do whatever it takes to survive. But now there's something else, a purpose beyond profit, a sense that maybe, just maybe, there's more to life than blood in the streets. March 1963. After serving 12 years, Bumpy Johnson is released from federal prison. He's 57 years old. The world has changed. Everything has changed. He steps off the bus on 125th Street, and it's like landing on an alien planet. The Harlem he left is gone. The Renaissance is a distant memory. The neighborhood is poorer, angrier, more desperate. Buildings are falling apart. Businesses are shuttered. And drugs, heroin, are everywhere. Young men nod off on street corners, their eyes vacant, their bodies wasted. Mothers weep for sons who have become addicts. Entire families are being destroyed by a poison flowing through the streets like a river. The Italian mob controls most of the heroin trade, and they're getting rich off Harlem's suffering. But Bumpy also sees something else, something that gives him hope. The civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. is preaching nonviolence. Malcolm X, now a national figure, is preaching self-defense and black nationalism. Young people are organizing, marching, fighting back. Harlem is alive again, just in a different way. People recognize him as he walks the streets. Old folks who remember his reign, young hustlers who have heard the legends. They greet him with respect, some with fear, some with hope. He goes home to Mame. She's waited 12 years. She's older, grayer, but her eyes are the same. When she sees him, she breaks down crying, throwing her arms around him. "Welcome home, Bumpy," she whispers. He holds her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling human for the first time in years. "I'm back," he says, "and I'm not going anywhere." But coming home and taking back what's his are two very different things. Harlem's underworld has splintered in Bumpy's absence. The Genovese family controls the heroin trade. Young black gangsters like Nicky Barnes and Frank Lucas are rising fast, moving product, making millions. Smaller operators fight over scraps. Nobody's waiting to hand Bumpy his throne back. He has to take it. He starts slowly, carefully. He reaches out to old allies, the ones who survived, the ones who stayed loyal. Junie Byatt is still around, older and slower but still deadly. Others are dead or in prison. But there are younger men too. Men who grew up hearing stories about Bumpy Johnson. Men who respect what he built. He rebuilds his network piece by piece. But this time he's smarter. He doesn't go to war with the Italians, that's a losing game. Instead, he carves out his own space. He takes control of the policy rackets again, the numbers games the Italians ignore because heroin is more profitable. And he does something unexpected. He starts giving back. He funds community programs, pays for funerals when families can't afford them, makes sure the elderly in his neighborhood have food and heat. Employs young men, not just as muscle, but as runners, clerks, legitimate workers. People notice. Slowly his reputation shifts. He's still feared, still respected as a gangster. But now he's also seen as a protector. But there's one problem Bumpy can't ignore. Heroin. It's a plague, a cancer, and it's destroying everything he fought to protect. Bumpy has always had a code. He sold numbers, run gambling, done extortion and violence, but drugs that destroy his own people. That's different. He makes a decision. He won't deal heroin, and he won't let anyone in his organization deal it either. It costs him. Young gangsters, the ones chasing fast money, think he's weak, out of touch, a relic. Some start working with the Italians directly, cutting Bumpy out. But Bumpy doesn't budge. One night, a young dealer named Anton approaches him. Cocky, disrespectful. He wants to use Bumpy's policy banks to launder drug money. Bumpy looks him dead in the eye. I won't poison my own people. You want to sell that poison, do it somewhere else, but not in my Harlem. Anton laughs. Your Harlem? Old man, this ain't your Harlem anymore. Bumpy says nothing. 3 days later, Anton is found in an alley, beaten within an inch of his life. He survives barely, but the message is clear. Some lines don't get crossed. During this time, Bumpy reconnects with Malcolm X. Malcolm is now a national figure, a fiery orator, a revolutionary, a man the FBI watches constantly. He's dangerous to the establishment, a threat. But he remembers Bumpy, remembers their conversations in Alcatraz. They meet in a small restaurant in Harlem. Malcolm knows Bumpy's reputation, but he also knows Bumpy has power. I need your help, Malcolm says. Bumpy raises an eyebrow. With what? Protection. The nation has enemies. The government, white supremacists, people within our own community who want me dead. I need men I can trust. Bumpy considers this, and what do I get? Malcolm smiles. Respect, legitimacy, a chance to be more than just a gangster. It's a strange partnership, the revolutionary and the criminal. But it works. Bumpy's men provide security at Nation of Islam events. They watch Malcolm's back, make sure no one gets close enough to harm him. And in return, Malcolm gives Bumpy something he's never had, a connection to something bigger than himself. For the first time, Bumpy feels like he's part of a movement. February 21st, 1965. The Audubon Ballroom. Bumpy stands in the back of the crowded room, watching Malcolm take the stage. Hundreds of people, all waiting to hear him speak. Bumpy's men are positioned throughout the hall, alert, ready. Malcolm begins his speech. Then chaos. Shouting in the crowd, movement, confusion. Bumpy sees it happening, 3 men rushing the stage, guns drawn. He moves fast, pushing through the crowd, but he's too far away. The shots ring out. Once, twice, a dozen times. Malcolm falls. The screaming starts, people running, panic. Bumpy reaches the stage, seconds too late. Malcolm X lies in a spreading pool of blood, his eyes staring at nothing. And in that moment, surrounded by chaos, by death, by betrayal, Bumpy Johnson realizes something. No one is untouchable. Not Malcolm, not him. No one. 14:12 Malcolm X is dead. The ambulance screams through the streets, but it's already over. 21 gunshot wounds. He dies before they can save him. Bumpy Johnson stands in the hospital corridor, staring at white walls, fists clenched so tight his knuckles go white. He doesn't cry. Men like Bumpy don't cry. But inside, something shatters. Malcolm wasn't just an ally. He was a mirror, showing Bumpy what he could have been. A man who fought for his people, not just for power. A man who stood for something greater than himself. And now he's gone, murdered by his own, by men who claim to be brothers. Bumpy walks out into the cold February night. Harlem is in shock. People gather on corners, in churches, in barbershops. Some weep, some rage, some just stand there broken. The voice of a generation, silenced at 39. And Bumpy Johnson, 60 years old, finally accepts what he's always known but never admitted. Violence always comes home. The mid-1960s are a turning point. Harlem is changing faster than Bumpy can comprehend. The civil rights movement is reaching its crescendo, marches, legislation, hope. Dr. King preaches love. Young activists organize. The Black Panthers rise armed and defiant. But Harlem itself is dying. Poverty is worse than ever. Buildings crumble. Businesses close. White flight guts the tax base and City Hall doesn't care. Police brutality is rampant. And heroin god, the heroine, is annihilating entire generations. Bumpy watches it all with growing helplessness. He still has power, still runs numbers, still commands respect. But the world is moving past him. The young gangsters don't care about his code, don't care about protecting the neighborhood. They're hungry, ruthless, willing to sell poison to their own mothers if the price is right. Frank Lucas, Nicky Barnes, young, ambitious, connected. They're building heroin empires, flying to Southeast Asia to buy pure product from the source, cutting out the Italian middlemen, flooding Harlem with cheap, deadly poison. Making millions. Bumpy confronts them, tries to reason. "You're killing our people," he tells Frank Lucas one night, "destroying everything we built." Lucas, cocky, dressed in an expensive suit, just smiles. "Old man, the world changed while you were locked up. This ain't the 40s no more. You had your time. This is my time now." Bumpy wants to put a bullet in his skull. But he doesn't. Because deep down he knows Lucas is right. The world has changed. And Bumpy Johnson is a relic. But Bumpy isn't finished yet. He may be older, slower, out of step, but he has something the young gangsters don't. Experience. 1967. A turf war erupts between rival drug dealers. Bodies drop. Innocent people caught in crossfire. Harlem becomes a war zone. The Genovese family sees opportunity. They plan to move in, take control, squeeze every dollar out of Harlem until there's nothing left. Bumpy won't allow it. He calls a meeting, not with the Italians, with the young black gangsters tearing Harlem apart. They gather in a dimly lit social club on 132nd Street. Frank Lucas, Nicky Barnes, a dozen others, young men with guns and attitudes, wondering why they should listen to some old-timer. Bumpy stands at the head of the table, no weapon, no backup. Just him. "You think you're smart," he says, voice low and steady, "building empires, but all you're doing is making it easy for the Italians to take everything." Silence. "You're fighting each other while they're getting ready to swallow you whole, and when they do, they won't let you keep a dime. They'll use you up and throw you away, just like they did to everyone before you." Frank Lucas leans back. "So what are you saying, old man?" Bumpy's eyes flash. "I'm saying you have two choices. Keep fighting each other and lose everything, or work together, keep the Italians out and build something that lasts." It's a gamble. These men don't trust each other. They certainly don't trust Bumpy. But slowly, grudgingly, they listen. Because even they know, Bumpy Johnson doesn't bluff. A fragile truce forms. The young gangsters agree to stop the open warfare. They carve up Harlem into territories, not perfectly, not permanently, but enough to stop the bloodshed. With a unified front, they push back against the Italian mob's encroachment. It's not peace, barely even a ceasefire. But it's enough. Bumpy has bought Harlem a little more time. But the cost weighs on him like chains. He's brokered peace between drug dealers, men poisoning his community. He's kept the Italians at bay, but only by empowering a new generation of criminals who care nothing for the people. Late at night, alone with Mame, he confesses his doubts. "I spent my whole life trying to control this neighborhood," he says, "trying to protect it, but maybe I just made it easier for the next generation to destroy it." Mame takes his hand. She's been with him through everything. Prison, wars, betrayals. She's the only person who truly knows him. "You did what you could, Bumpy," she says gently. You can't save everyone, you can't fix everything, but you tried. And people remember that. He wants to believe her, but he's not sure he does. 1968. Bumpy Johnson is 62 years old, and he's tired. Not just physically, though his body shows the wear of 6 decades of violence, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. He's seen too much, lost too much. Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated in April. Cities erupt in riots. Harlem burns, again. Robert Kennedy is assassinated in June. Vietnam rages on, sending young black men to die in jungles halfway around the world. And Harlem, his Harlem, drowns in drugs, poverty, and despair. Bumpy walks the streets like a ghost. People still greet him with respect, still call him Mr. Johnson, still ask for help when they're in trouble. But he feels the weight of every failure, every compromise, every life lost. He thinks about Malcolm, about what he said years ago in Alcatraz. There's another way, a way to build power they can't take from you. Bumpy never found that way. He built an empire on violence and vice, and now, watching it crumble, he wonders if it was worth it. October 7, 1968. A cool autumn evening. Bumpy is at Wells Restaurant on 7th Avenue, a place he's been coming to for decades, having dinner with old friends, men who have known him since the beginning. They're laughing, telling old stories, reliving the glory days. For a moment, Bumpy feels young again. Then, sharp pain in his chest, like someone squeezing his heart in a vice. He grabs the table, his face goes pale. Bumpy, one of his friends says, alarmed, "You okay?" He tries to speak, can't. The pain intensifies, spreads down his arm, vision blurs. He knows what this is. He stands stumbling, trying to reach the door, trying to breathe too. He collapses on the sidewalk. People rush over, someone calls for an ambulance. But Bumpy knows it's too late. Lying there on cold pavement, looking up at the Harlem sky, he thinks about his life. The violence, the power, the money, the respect. Was it enough? Was it worth it? He doesn't have an answer. And then, darkness. The funeral of Ellsworth Raymond Johnson is unlike anything Harlem has seen. Thousands line the streets, not just gangsters and hustlers, but ordinary folks, teachers, shopkeepers, grandmothers who remember the Depression, children who only know him from stories. They come to pay their respects. Inside the church, the service is packed. Mame sits in the front row, veiled, silent. Frank Lucas is there. Nicky Barnes, old-timers who fought alongside Bumpy, even Italian mobsters paying respects to a worthy adversary. The preacher speaks carefully, navigating the contradiction. A man who was both criminal and protector, sinner and savior. He was not a perfect man, the preacher says, but he was our man. He stood up when others bowed down, he protected when others prayed, and he never forgot where he came from. As the casket is carried out, the crowd follows. Silent, solemn. For a moment, just a moment, Harlem stops, pauses, remembers. In the years after Bumpy's death, Harlem continues to change. Frank Lucas builds his heroin empire, until he's arrested and sentenced to 70 years. Nicky Barnes follows the same path: wealth, power, betrayal, prison. The Italian mob's grip eventually weakens as federal investigations and demographics shift the power dynamics. In Harlem, it struggles, declines, nearly dies. But it survives. In the 80s and 90s, community activists, artists, entrepreneurs begin to rebuild. They fight gentrification, preserve black culture, honor the history. And they remember Bumpy Johnson. Not as a saint, not as a villain, but as a complicated man who lived in complicated times. Books are written, movies are made, television shows bring his story to new generations. And the people of Harlem, the ones who lived through those years, still tell stories about the man who walked among them, who protected them when no one else would, who stood up to the mob, the police, the system itself. A man who ruled Harlem not with fear alone, but with respect. Bumpy Johnson's life is a mirror held up to America itself. A country that claims opportunity but builds systems designed to crush black people. A society that criminalizes survival, then wonders why people turn to crime. Bumpy didn't choose to be a gangster because he was evil. He chose it because in Jim Crow America, it was one of the few paths to power available to a black man. He wasn't a hero, but he wasn't a monster either. He was a survivor, a strategist, a man who looked at the world as it was, not as it should be, and carved out space for himself and his people. His methods were brutal, his choices morally compromised, his empire built on vice. But in the end, what Bumpy Johnson really built was a legacy. A legacy of resistance, of refusing to bow, of fighting back against a system designed to break him. And in Harlem, in the stories still told on street corners, in barbershops, in the memories of those who remain, that legacy lives on. Because Bumpy Johnson was more than just Harlem's most dangerous man. He was the blood in the streets, the shadow in the alleys, the terror and the protector. A man who built an empire on violence and somehow convinced a community he was their king. Flawed, dangerous, unforgettable. And in a world that tried to erase him, he made sure they could never forget his name. The streets of Harlem still remember. They remember the numbers runners, the policy kings, the wars fought in shadows. They remember the man who walked among them with a gun in his coat and loyalty in his heart. They remember Bumpy Johnson, the most dangerous man Harlem ever knew. And they always will.